Rams. Quarterback, Southern California.
What's up, Bears fans? Welcome back to another edition of the Willis Twin Towers podcast. The Flus has been let loose, guys. It finally happened. I'm surprised, as you can all imagine, we're all surprised here, as I'm sure you all are, that he was let go mid-season, as the Bears have never done such a thing. So before we get into all that, just real quick, guys, as always, please, as you come in here, like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can find us here at Barroom Network on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts at. You can also find us all on X or Twitter. I am at @_Jeff Willis. Tim is at Tim Willis 24, and I'll move over to him in just a minute here. And you can also follow our executive producer, Aldo Gandia, at Barroom Network there as well. So, like I said, guys, I'm going to move this over to Tim to let him start this off, but I can't believe that this actually happened mid-season. It's the first time ever. This is massive news as far as the Bears are concerned. So before we get into all the week's activities, I'm sure most of you guys have been seeing what's going on with the press conferences and all the other shows have been talking about this. But what are your first thoughts about this, Tim, as we get rolling with this new era of Bears football under Thomas Brown?
Well, first of all, like you said already, it's never happened before. So surprised would be the right word. But at the same time, I wasn't really surprised, just because this is something we've been talking about, that there would be a possibility of this if they continued on the trajectory that they were, because it was bad. And you could see that he was starting to lose the locker room. And once you do that, it's over, in my opinion. And with new leadership in place with Warren and Poles, you got the sense that as long as they could talk the McCaskey family into making the move, then it would happen. And that's obviously what happened in this circumstance, is that he had clearly lost the locker room. Most of you know, if you don't already, there's been reports that Jalen Johnson had a massive tirade at the end of the game once Flus started his normal garbage nonsense. Well, I'm proud of you guys for the adversity, and we did so well. And then obviously Jalen Johnson blew up. I'm tired of losing. I've been here for 5 years. This is ridiculous. And he confirmed that on his interview on 670 The Score. And I'm sure he wasn't the only player, but that was the one that was reported out because he was the one that gave the most, what's the word I want? I guess you could say dramatic speech afterwards about how upset he was, and rightfully so. And once you lose one of your captains, in my opinion, it's over. The experiment was over. I didn't like how it was handled, how they allowed Flus to do his press conference. I understand their thought process, because they apparently, it's been reported, and then Warren also said during that press conference that the decision had not yet been made on Friday morning before Flus gave his press conference. But if you know that it's a possibility, which they clearly did, they should have said, hey, the press conference is going to be delayed until a later time. That way, you at least can have your conversation and make your decision, and you're not sending that guy out there to have his press conference and looking like a fool. That's really what happened, because he was bombarded with questions about, do you believe you're going to be the head coach? And, in his response, of course, was, I'm preparing for San Francisco like I normally would. So to me, it was just handled poorly. I know they didn't want to give anything away by canceling it, but they could have just said, hey, we're going to postpone this until a later day, since it's Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. You could have made some nonsense excuse. You didn't have to say that we just didn't have a decision made yet, and we didn't want people to think that a decision had already been made. To me, that's a nonsense excuse, and they could have come up with something else.
But the decision had been made. I mean, it ended up being made that way anyway. So the reason I have a problem with that whole thing, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I mean, the whole reason I have a problem with that in the first place is, obviously, I mean, it looks bad when you're going to fire the guy 2 hours later. But at the same time, it's like, if they would at least, delayed the press conference, yes, people are going to speculate, well, He's probably getting canned. Well, guess what? You canned him anyways. So why let him go up to the podium and then make his speech, say what he's got to say, look totally deflated and like a guy who's clearly going to be fired at the end of the season anyways. I mean, if not sooner, why put him through that when you're going to fire him 2 hours later? Anyways, if you haven't come up to the decision, fine. That's fine. But you still did come to the decision 2 hours later to fire him. So just delay the press conference. Who cares what the speculation is? If you don't fire him, then he goes to have his presser anyways, and everybody's like, well, damn, I guess we were wrong. So who cares about that? That's what I don't understand about the whole thing, and it makes no sense. It just looks bad. The one thing that was a positive about that is that Warren did address that and take accountability for that in his press conference and say, yes, that's on us. We messed up, in essence, our bad kind of thing.
And even said we could have done better. He even said that, those exact words.
I was going to say, not those exact words, because he is an attorney. So he's a very smart individual who doesn't talk like I do. So that at the end of the day, yes. I mean, I will say I give him credit for the fact he took accountability for it, but that should have never happened in the first place.
Well, speaking of the accountability, MC Fact makes a good point here. He says, I hear they wanted accountability from Flus. And it's interesting he says that because we waited how long for Flus to start taking accountability? And then, over the last couple of weeks, it was like he was trying too hard to take accountability. He was taking accountability for everything. So it was almost like, hey, we had this conversation. They want me to take accountability instead of putting it on everybody else. And then it just looked so, it wasn't authentic. It was so inauthentic. So to me, that was like, maybe it was a good thing that he was taking accountability, but at the same time, it was too much. It wasn't like he was actually taking the accountability. But, Jeff, I want to talk to you about this because it was very interesting because after the firing was made, there's been a lot of speculation that Ryan Poles wanted to fire Flus after the New England game and that the McCaskey shut it down. Who knows what the truth is? Some people believe that it was Ryan Poles wanted to keep him, and Kevin Warren was the one that said, okay, we need to get him out of here. It's time to move on, Ryan. Let's make the decision. But I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, who have already seen the Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles press conference. And Jeff, to me, it really looked like Ryan Poles was like a sad puppy in that. Like he was upset. For one, I'm sure a lot of it was he was upset that he had to fire his buddy because they were close and that was the guy that he brought in here. Whether or not it's true that was his handpicked coach or that was his choice of the three options that he was given, nobody knows. There's been reports and speculation both ways. But regardless, they clearly built a relationship. They were friends. It was obvious. And we saw on Hard Knocks how upset Ryan Poles was just cutting a player in Adrian. Oh my gosh, what's his last name? Adrian. Colbert. They just re-signed him. But regardless, you could tell he's got a heart of gold for his team and his players and his coaches and everybody. So to me, he looked very sad. And I think some of that too was it really looked like Kevin Warren is kind of taking leadership here. Like, this is my team now. This is my thing. And it's been all over the place. If you've watched if you've watched other podcasts, Aldo has been a big proponent of this, that he believes that Kevin Warren is taking too much of an approach of this is my thing now. And everybody else needs to it's like almost like a dictatorship now. Like he's taking control. He's taking the reins. And me personally, Jeff, I believe that's a huge, massive mistake if Kevin Warren is the one that's leading the charge in the coaching search. He's not a football guy. He should not make the final decision. He is not a football guy. He is a lawyer, a politician, and he's a businessman, not a football mind. Go ahead.
Well, it's funny you say that, actually, because if any of you guys watched the most recent edition of Gabriel Talks Football, Greg, our resident scout here on the Barroom Network, was talking about how basically it's in a coach's a GM's contract more often than not that they are the final decision maker on the roster, the 53-man roster, and the coaching hiring and firing. So like, either termination or bringing them on board. So my guess is in that matter is that, I don't think it's going to be, I see what you're saying. There's no way in hell that Kevin Warren doesn't have a hand in this, because he absolutely will. But I do want to say that he mentioned in the press conference, not once, but I believe twice, that Ryan Poles has the ultimate decision in this when they were together. And we do have some clips on that presser we'll show you guys in a few minutes here. But I do think that in essence that he, like I said, he's going to be a part of the process, but Poles is going to be a big part of this too. They're going to work together and bringing people in. And what I do like about it is that you've got a football mind and you've got a guy who's a non-football mind who's got a different perspective. But as long as the football guy is the guy who makes the decision, I'm happy with that. The ultimate
Agreed. Decision. That's how it should be. That's how it should be. He should be helping in the search, finding candidates, but Ryan Poles should make the final decision, period.
Well, I think it's important that they're interviewing them together and all those things too. Yes. I think that's the fact that they're working in tandem on it. I think it's a positive, me personally. Again, though, as long as Ryan Poles does get to make that ultimate decision, because I think his hands were tied the last time, in my humble opinion. They already had 3 final candidates when he was hired as GM as who they wanted for head coach that Bill Polian actually had suggested to them. Matt Eberflus was one. Dan Quinn was one, and I can't remember who the other was. Jim Caldwell was the other one. Thank you.
2 Colts guys. 2 Colts guys from the
there you go. 2 Colts ties. So, I mean,
stupid. What if the Colts won? Since
I can see why Polian would have liked these guys, but again, it's like what I mean. Look, Ryan Poles liked Matt Eberflus. He wanted him around. He didn't fire him, in the last 2 years when he could have. So it's not like he had his hands tied through this whole thing. But I don't think at the very beginning of the process that he had quite the power that he probably should have had in that process. Is all I'm trying to say here. So
agreed.
So I want to continue on with this, but I want to mention you guys real quick because I'm sure there's plenty of you guys in the chat who are expecting Herb Howard to be here tonight. We meant to mention this earlier. I don't know if anybody's been tweeting about it or not, but there was a scheduling conflict that we had, and Herb's not going to be here until next week. So we will have him on for next week, but fingers crossed, he should be here for the entire show with us, which will be pretty awesome. So we hope you guys will come back again for us next week with Herb. That should be a pretty awesome episode after Thomas Brown's first game as head coach. So,
well, Jeff, let's go into this video. Let's go into this clip because I actually disagree with you. I do think that Kevin Warren should be in the room, and I think that he should be involved in that process and helping find coaching candidates. But I think it's the opposite. I don't think he's going to let Poles make the final decision. I think he wants the decision himself. And if you watch this video, it takes him about 30 seconds just to say Ryan Poles is the final decision. Let's take a listen if we can.
What if you guys have dissenting opinions when it comes down to 2 people who someone's got to make that call?
We'll work that out. Yes. And again, Ryan he's the general manager. He's head of football operations. And so he will have the final say if it ever got to that point. But I'm confident that we will work through it because the good thing about it, so long as we keep the center of our decisions, what's in the best interest of the Chicago Bears, our players, as we go forward, it will become clear as far as who is the person should lead this franchise from a football standpoint, from a coaching standpoint.
Before you say anything, watch the first 10 seconds. You see, it's the first time I've noticed this. When Kevin Warren says Ryan Poles is head of football operations, Ryan Poles rolled his eyes.
What if you guys have dissenting opinions when it comes down to 2 people who someone's got to make that call?
We'll work that out. Yes, and again, Ryan he's the general manager. He's head of football operations, and so he will have the final.
Did you see it?
I don't see him rolling his eyes.
He goes like this. Like, it's not my final decision. You can sit here and say this to everybody, but I think he was irritated. You can clearly tell he's irritated there, in my opinion.
I think the way I looked at it was look, I didn't hate it. I thought that Kevin Warren, I thought he was genuine with what he said there. That look, I mean, I think he truly believes that they're going to come to a decision and it's going to be relatively clear to them what that is. And that was a great question though from the reporter, whoever that was. Yes. I couldn't tell by the voice, but that was an excellent question because what if they do have dissenting opinions on something? And the fact that Warren said that they would work through, McFact doesn't look like he's very pleased with that statement, but I thought that was I didn't mind it so much. I looked at it like he's looking at this from a positive manner where they're going to work through it together. And I do think the fact that he said this is Ryan Poles' decision, he's head of football ops, I didn't see an eye roll there, Tim. I don't know how even the second time around, I didn't see that quite the way you did, but that's just me. I don't know if you guys in the chat did or not, but I just felt like that. And what I did like about Ryan Poles there, though, when he was talking about when they first was asked the question, what if you guys have a dissent in opinion? And he said, I'm confident we'll work through it. Ryan Poles was nodding his head up and down. So that makes me feel like they're in agreement with this, that they're in tandem in this. And I think they're going to work pretty well together on it. And I have a lot more, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I have a lot more confidence in this process that started mid-season now with Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren doing a thorough process together than I feel about the head start that George McCaskey and Bill Polian gave Ryan Poles when he hired Matt Eberflus, if that makes sense to you guys. So in my opinion, I feel like this is a better process. I am somewhat optimistic about it. We can get into the candidates a little bit later, but I just feel like Thomas Brown, if he coaches well through the remainder of this season and he leads the team as well as he's coached the offense in the last couple weeks, which I want to get into that a little bit more later too. But I think he's going to have real opportunity if some positive things develop in the next several weeks here. But in essence, there was another question too, by the way, and this is a good time for this, because in relation to what we were just talking about with the search committee that was brought in with Bill Polian, in the last hiring cycle, and the one before that, if you guys remember, Ernie Accorsi was brought in to help guide that cycle when they
two dinosaurs.
Two former GMs who were brought in, as Tim says, dinosaurs, guys who are probably a little out of it nowadays, were brought in to help assist the process. So they were asked in the press conference, this was another good question by the reporter who asked it, what if there would be another situation like that in the future here in this coming search?
Are you guys going to use either a consultant or a committee in your hiring, or is it just going to be the two of you?
We haven't made that decision, right now. So I think we're going to lean on both of us and our entire organization and everyone in kind of that think tank, and make sure that we make the best decision.
I don't like it. I don't like the thought of it at all. And to me, you should not need a search committee. You should not need a consultant. That is why you brought Ryan Poles here. If you would have let him choose his coach from the very beginning out of his own pool of candidates, this would have been different. I am a firm believer that it's not that Ryan Poles didn't have the autonomy to select his coach, but they gave him 3 names and said, hey, we strongly encourage you to choose one of these 3 names. That's my honest opinion on it, because he hired him 2 days after he was interviewed and hired. 2 days later. So to me, he was never truly given the opportunity to pick who he wanted. So to me, starting from the beginning where he can bring in his own pool of candidates, he can interview his own people, now he should be able to make his own decision, and now he can live with it. And here's the other part of this. If you allow Kevin Warren, or you allow a committee, or you allow a consultant to come in and say, these are the guys that we like and who should do it, then now you can't put it all on Ryan Poles if you choose one of those candidates. Because this way, if you allow Ryan Poles to take full autonomy, you can say at the end, if the coach is bad, it's on him. If the coach is good, you did a great job. So to me, you have to give him the opportunity, and only him the opportunity, to make that decision. The only thing that the McCaskies or Kevin Warren should be doing in this process is bringing in candidates or contacting candidates to bring them in so that Ryan Poles can do the interview. Of course, Kevin Warren should be involved in the interview, and maybe even the McCaskies, just so that they understand the thought. I agree the McCaskies shouldn't have anything to do with the decision, but they are the organization.
Where I stand right now is they hired Kevin Warren to come in and be this president and CEO of this football team. The McCaskies should no longer have any involvement in the football operations, period. I don't want to see George McCaskey interviewing anybody. They should trust their president and CEO and the GM that they hired to be able to do their effing jobs, period. That's the way I agree with that.
I agree with that. I'm not disagreeing. I meant it from the organizational standpoint. If they want to use them for, hey, this is our facilities and this is that, blah, 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 then you can involve them. But I agree with you as far as the decision, they shouldn't be involved in that at all. That is why they brought in Kevin Warren. Yes. But to me, regardless, no matter what, Ryan Poles needs to be the one to make the decision, period. That is why he's here. And he's done a pretty good job as a GM, in my opinion. He's obviously had his mistakes, as every GM does. But regardless, it should be his choice, period. And there's a lot of good names out there, but at the same time, I do think it's a positive to have Kevin Warren because he does know a lot of people in the league and can help bring candidates in that maybe Ryan Poles wouldn't have the same, what's the word? He may not have the same persuasive ability to bring some of these guys in that Kevin Warren could, or Kevin Warren could promise.
The one thing I'll say about that, because we played that clip about the search committee, I initially did not like that myself either, what they had said about the way they answered it, because they didn't completely shut it down. But I will say this. I do have faith, and this is just my speculation, guys. So don't quote me on any of this, but this is my personal thoughts on this. I feel like if they did do anything like that, it would not be anywhere near the same thing as like I said before, McCaskey bringing in Ernie Accorsi and Bill Polian. I think it would be more like Warren and Poles using one of those independent search firms that scour the league and find reputable talent from around the league that may not be easy to pinpoint kind of thing. But I don't think it would be an ultimate. I don't think it would be what it was the ultimate decision maker. It would just maybe help them find some candidates. But I'm sure they have a pretty decent sized list right now of the guys who they have at the top of their radar kind of thing. And again, we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute here. But I just feel like, again, and PZ makes a comment in here that micromanaging doesn't work. And I agree with that, PZ. And I think that's why I said earlier that McCaskies don't need to be a part of this process at all. I think if Warren, and again, like I said earlier, I agree with Tim that this the ultimate decision should be Poles. But I think that I do like that they're working in tandem. And I think that's a good thing that Warren is a part of this process. And I think he should be a part of the interview process as well, which I'm sure he will be. But again, as long as Poles is making that ultimate decision, I like it. I think it's a good thing. And it's totally different than what they've done in the past, at least in my opinion. So, and it's probably many, many people's opinion. I don't know if it's even opinion at this point. It's more like fact. So, but in any case, it is what it is. That's what happened. You know, I mean, Flus is gone. They're going to look at this. They're going to look at this process, starting with Thomas Brown here, you know, as he's going to get his basically an audition here over the next 5 games. Though I will say I like the way that the offense played early in the season, later in the season, or the last couple weeks. I mean, as he took over and he started to kind of put his fingerprints on it, and I really kind of liked his play calling. I haven't had too many qualms about it, and there have been several scenarios in the past decade of me watching Bears football and not being very happy with the offensive play calling, and the fact that I've gone 2 games now without having too many head-scratching decisions. I'm pretty happy about that. But the fact he's taking over the team now, I'm glad he's still going to be doing the offensive play calling, but now how can he relate to the defense and the special teams? How can he make all this work in tandem? And so far, I've liked what's been said in the press conferences. I like the way he looks as if he's led everybody that talks about him as a leader. Even the offensive staff who's had the meetings now, or the press conferences so far. So if you guys didn't watch, I believe it was yesterday, because I think Thursdays are when they bring in the coordinators for press conferences. They had in
Chris Beatty.
I know his name now. Chris Beatty, thank you. The wide receivers coach who's taken over now as the offensive coordinator, who just won't be calling plays, obviously. But he kind of talked about the role he's taken on and how it relates to Thomas Brown now as he's taken over as the head coach. And he mentioned like time management, clock management, how that was one of his responsibilities in the past that he'd done, and he felt very comfortable doing it. So I think it's important that they're addressing that right away, as he said in his presser as well. So like he even said flat out that it was one of the first things they talked about is like the in-game clock management and the situational awareness in those moments and whatnot. So
Chris Beatty has experience doing that. He did that in college.
He mentioned that in the press conference that he has experience doing that in his past. And obviously, they're going to make that a part of his job now. So I think it's good. We're going to have to see how it works out, obviously, because we haven't seen it yet. But to me, it's going to be awfully hard to have the same kind of blunders that they have had throughout the course of Eberflus' tenure late in games, rather. But I feel like we have to give him a chance here. I don't want to say that this is, we have to stake the claim that no matter how well he does, if he wins several games later in the season and they're showing improvement, we got to hire him. I still think they need to go through a thorough hiring process, but they do absolutely need to give Thomas Brown an opportunity, and they need to look at this how he does here and how he leads the team here and actually take that seriously into account. And if he does well, they need to take that seriously into account and really consider him for the job. So I think all this is going to play a factor here, and I think we're going to be looking at a very exhaustive search as well. There have been a lot of reports out there in the past week or so about what's going on with this with the Bears, and either with the search itself or the kind of candidates they might be interested in. Who's actually in charge, who wanted who there, who actually wanted him gone, what kind of holdups they had, and I don't know what of it is actually true. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because Eberflus is gone. The one thing that is important here to look forward to is who is, what is going to happen with this ultimate decision, and is it going to be clear and obvious that they're working together in tandem, or is there going to be reports coming out left and right at that time that Warren is making these decisions here? That will kind of bother me a little bit, but we'll have to wait and see. So, what other thoughts do you have, Tim, on this before we kind of get into maybe some of who the coaching candidates might be coming in here, or maybe some other we got to talk about San Francisco coming up, obviously, as well, too. So, and also there's been some speculation about trading for a coach too, which we can get to as well. But so what are your, do you have any last minute thoughts on anything before we kind of get into that stuff?
Not really. I don't trust the Bears. I don't, if we're being honest. Well, that's the most difficult part of all of this is just because we fired a poor, terrible, whatever you want to call it, coach, doesn't mean that I'm confident that we'll bring the right guy in. I will say this, though. I have a very short list of candidates in my head, but I would say right now the number one on that list is Thomas Brown. And it's not because at this juncture in time, I think he would be the best head coach. I think it would be the best case scenario if he were hired as the head coach, because I believe if he has success over these next 5 games and he's able to bring this team together, that would be the best case scenario, because you don't have to rehire your coaching staff. You don't have to change anything with the players as far as that goes. Most things can be kept the same. I believe this team is a winner with what they have. They just haven't had a winning culture. And I want to preface everything by saying this. I'm sick of hearing the talk about leader of men. Every NFL coach should be a leader of men. That is their freaking responsibility.
Why do you even have to add that to it? What else would they be a freaking leader of? Leader of men?
That's what they're supposed to be. What they need to look for, what they need to be looking for is a coach that has a winning culture. Somebody who can bring a winning culture in here. Do not bring in another coordinator or another coach who hasn't won anything. Matt Eberflus never won jack squat as a coach, ever. Bring in somebody who has either won.
I think we lost Tim for a minute here. I don't know what happened to him, but
won a Super Bowl or been to part of an organization who has had a
well, it looks like he's still lagging. So basically, guys, I'm in agreement with Tim with a lot of this here. Okay, I feel like there's an issue with this leader of men thing, and like I said, I mean, what are they trying to say? Of course, you're looking for a leader. Anybody who's in a head coaching position should be a leader. That's obvious. I don't know if what they're trying to say is they're looking for a particular type of leader, but that's a really stupid choice of words to use for that, because in essence, I think they might be looking more for like one of those alpha type males, alpha type leaders. Flus is a little more of the players he coach, who is very kind of soft spoken, didn't really show a lot of fire and passion. And I think they might be looking for a little bit more of that now. It would be my guess. I mean, Thomas Brown has certainly showed a little bit more of that so far, at least as far as the way he is very deliberate in the things he says. So I think that there's a lot to say with that. But, I just feel like as long as they, like I said before, as long as they have a thorough process here and they're exhaustive in their search, I'm confident that they can find the right guy to lead the way. I don't understand why you would use that term. We're looking for a leader of men. The first thing I said to Aldo and Tim when I heard that was, no shit. Of course you're looking for a leader of men. That's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. It's dumb. Of course you're looking for a leader of men. What else? Again, what else would they be leading? That's so stupid. Like you want someone to lead your program, obviously. So again, I think it has more to do with like the type of leader they're looking for, but I just don't understand why they wouldn't come out and say that then. Well, probably because it would narrow their list of candidates down. But again, they don't even say it. Why say anything? It's just stupid. But in any case, I digress. It just that was the one thing from the press conference that I took that really, really bugged me, that I couldn't get over for a while there. But again, it's like, I just feel like if they do the process right, it'll be pretty obvious who the guy should be. Like Warren said in the press conference, and again, as long as Poles has that ultimate decision in the end, as I said before, multiple times now, I'll be content with this. But who knows what will actually be true? It just all depends on who gets hired. I'm sure there will be candidates that nobody's expecting to be interviewed that will be interviewed. I'm sure many or several, at least, of the major candidates everybody does want to see interviewed will be interviewed. But who ends up getting hired, to me, will be a tell as to who is actually kind of having the say in this. You know what I mean? So we'll have to wait and see. But, it kind of brings me to what we've been talking about, or what we've been hearing be talked about throughout the Twitter sphere, so to speak, about how the Bears could potentially or may be interested in trading draft compensation, or should be interested, I should say, in trading draft compensation for a head coach, someone such as Kyle Shanahan. And I mean, in my opinion, I would maybe look for someone like a Mike Tomlin too, but neither one of those guys is likely going to be available, which is the whole point of the backlash that's gone on against that argument. I mean, could the Bears have interest in some of these kind of coaches? Of course they could, but would they trade the draft compensation it would take to get them? To me, that's kind of doubtful. But also the biggest problem with the whole conjecture of this, I don't know if that's the right word I'm using or not, but the biggest problem with the whole thing is the fact that it is highly, highly doubtful that either one of those any of these teams that have successful head coaches like that would want to let their coaches go. Kyle Shanahan has been to the Super Bowl twice and been to 2 other NFC championship games. Why on earth would they be looking to fire him? They've had 2 bad seasons, and they were both injury-marred seasons. This year, they've been really plagued by injuries. So, and that's we'll get into that a little bit more later too with the upcoming matchup against the Bears. But the fact that we're looking at this and we're hearing people talk about the fact that the Bears could and should have interest in these guys, that's an obvious point to me. But how are they going to be available? They're not going to be available, at least in my personal opinion. I mean, it'd be awfully difficult for me to see a world where the Niners would let Kyle Shanahan go for any reason. And even John Lynch said today, I'm not sure if it was in a press conference or what, but I saw it reported on Twitter that he basically said it's comical that people would talk about us wanting to let Shanahan go. So, that's just my thoughts on it. I do see some questions that you guys have had here in the chat, and all those queuing them up for us. But Cliff, I saw your comment here about hiring Shanahan's dad, and I know you have a question that you asked earlier in the show about it too. So I'll kind of address it now. I just feel like it would kind of surprise me to see a guy like Mike Shanahan come back into the league and coach, in the same conference as his son. I would really find that hard to believe. I mean, maybe. I mean, I don't know what world that would be. I would guess he's probably pretty happy in retirement and helping his son where he can. But I just, if it was even a viable possibility, he hasn't been in the league in so long that it's like, I mean, would he be able to come back and handle that kind of load, Whereas if you're going to make an argument about a guy who's aged like Bill Belichick, for instance, Bill Belichick was just a head coach last year. So if you're going to make the argument for Belichick, and there's 2 sides of the Belichick coin, they're very, 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 there's no middle ground with Bill Belichick. Either people love him and want him to be the coach, or people can't stand the notion of him being the head coach. So the way I look at it is, and Cliff says that Shanahan was linked to a potential deal a few years ago. That may or may not be true. I didn't see that, Cliff. I'm not sure about that. I'm not going to say you're wrong. I believe you, but I guess maybe there was something there. Maybe somebody was just making something up. I don't know. I mean, if he was actually interested, it would still surprise me, especially with his son coaching the league, like I said, and in the same conference, no doubt. But I mean, if he was interested, I mean, you'd probably entertain at least his brain, maybe interview him and pick his brain a little bit. But I think he's a little past the age of, like I said, he hasn't been in the league for so long now. But again, a guy like Belichick who's been out for 1 year now, he's talked to North Carolina now in the college ranks about being a head coach. He was interviewed there, and I guess he met with him again recently. So, I think it's a very real possibility. I saw a report that he was trying to get his son, Steve Belichick, onto the staff with him with the assurance that Steve would take over the team when Bill inevitably retired in the near future, because he's aging too. I think he's 73 or going to be 73. So as far as candidates are concerned, and Tim is having some internet issues, if you guys haven't noticed, so you're probably getting a little bit more of me than you wanted to. Sorry about that. But as far as, we'll get into some of these coaching candidates a little bit here, because we were just talking about, obviously, the potential with Shanahan and, some of the guys who are already under contract. But when you talk about guys like who have been in the league and coached before, like Mike Vrabel, like Bill Belichick, there's obviously some comfort there in knowing that they've done the job. Obviously, Belichick a hell of a lot longer than Vrabel did. And with, obviously 8 total Super Bowls, that he's got rings for. So the way I look at it is, let's just kind of start with Belichick here, because I think I am a little bit more there. I know there's a lot of people out here. I'm probably going to catch some slack for this, but I don't hate the idea of Bill Belichick. I think it's heavily doubtful, in my personal opinion, that they would go down that route. I just don't see that really. I think he should be interviewed. I don't know that he would be. I think he would bring the Bears something that they desperately need right now, which is someone to come down and lay down the law. I think he would absolutely do that. I think there are the detractors. A lot of them would say he's a defensive-minded guy, that you need to bring in an offensive-minded guy to come in there and work with your quarterback, because that's the most important thing. I mean, the guy was only the head coach of the greatest quarterback to ever play the game, so there's that. Maybe you can make the argument that the Patriots were maybe only as good as they were because of Tom Brady and not so much Belichick. Defenses were all still pretty damn good when Belichick was there. He had great defenses before Tom Brady was there in his other stops. It's hard for me to say that Bill Belichick wouldn't be a great coach without Tom Brady. Now, does he win 6 Super Bowls in New England without Tom Brady? Probably not. But still, this guy has been there, done that, and he has seen a ton. He has obviously got a phenomenal mind for the game of football. He's been through it all. He's seen everything. And I was watching today, there was an interview on CHGO. Brian Baldinger joins them once a week, if you guys don't know that. I think he was with them a few days ago, but I watched it today. And he was talking about how Belichick, he thinks that right now Belichick has probably been watching, since he's been off all year, hasn't had a job coaching. He's probably been watching a lot of tape on the college game and seeing what's going on over there, how they're doing things, how they're scheming things up offensively, defensively. Because as we all know, things from the college game end up making their way up to the pro game one way or another. And they either work or they don't work. And when they do work, they have a tendency to stick for a while. But as we all know, like I said, those things do come into the game. They do come into the professional game. So Belichick, Baldy thinks, is probably watching a lot of college football. And I would venture to say that's likely true. I would bet he's doing that too. If the guy clearly loves the game, he's still involved in it at a high, maybe not actually in a coaching aspect of it, but he's still coming on the Manning Cast with ESPN when they do the Monday Night Football games. I believe he's on another show that he does work on. He comes on to Pat McAfee every once in a while. So, again, I don't hate the notion of Bill Belichick being the head coach. I just don't see it as a likelihood. But again, as I said before, I think he would bring something that the Bears do need, which is a certain level of discipline, a certain level of accountability, both for the players and I'm sure the coaches and even himself. He'll take accountability for his own mistakes. But he'll be hard. He'll be a disciplinarian. He's not going to be the kind of guy who's going to be all, fun and games all the time. He's going to let you know when you've made mistakes. He's going to let you know when there's corrections to be made. And, it's just funny to me seeing some of the clips over the past several years of some of the players that have played for Bill Belichick, and some of the things they've said about him. I can think of one clip in the back of my mind right now, and I can't remember what it was on. I want to say it was on the Tom Brady series on ESPN Plus. I think it's called Man. Gosh, I can't think of what it's called now. Man on the gridiron, a man on the field, something along those lines. I can't.
Man in the arena.
Man in the arena. Thank you. I don't know why I couldn't think of that, but what was significant about that to me is there's. I think it was in that show, and I could be wrong about this, so don't hold me to it, guys. But there's a clip where Julian Edelman is like doing a Bill Belichick impression, and he's talking about how the kind of ways he would be like very detailed with the way he would coach his guys and the things he would crack down on. And he was doing this little voice with Belichick about like how he was critiquing a receiver. He was going, "You mean to tell me you can't make an 8-yard out route? There's guys at Foxborough High School that can do that." And those weren't the exact words, but I want to see a coach who's not afraid to come in there and talk some shit to the players like that to get them to do their jobs at a high level. I think that I like that. And look, again, as you could say a lot about Bill Belichick and whether or not he would be a good fit. And the fact of the matter is that, he's getting as old as he is now, and he's probably not a long-term answer or anything like that. But if you could get him to come in and he established a good plan for the short amount of time that he would probably be the head coach, and he had a good succession plan in place or you at least had a good succession plan in place with him for when he does take off, I wouldn't hate that idea. Again, though, as I said at the start of my tirade about Bill Belichick, I don't think it's likely. I just don't see them going down that road. I don't even know if they would interview the guy, but I wouldn't hate it personally. And I know I'm going to catch some flack for that, but again, there's, like I said, like 3 times now, there are just some things he could bring to the table that they don't have yet. So, but in any case, that's kind of my thoughts on him. Tim, I don't know if your internet's doing any better now. It kind of looks like your face is frozen, so it might not be. But to just D. Staron, you're mentioning here that asking if Belichick just interviewed for a college job. I mentioned that a couple minutes ago that yes, North Carolina did interview him, and I believe they actually brought him back again for another meeting. And supposedly the report out there is, the rumor is, and I don't know who made the report, so I'm sorry to whoever it is that did that for not giving them their due diligence. But supposedly he is trying to work a deal in place with North Carolina that if he takes over the job there, that when he does inevitably retire, because he is getting old, as you guys know, that his son Steve Belichick would take the program over and be the guy, and he would be on staff with him from the outset as well. So I don't know how true any of that is. It's hard to say. J2K says the interview was over Zoom and it wasn't serious. I don't know. I don't know, guys. I would tend to doubt that he wants to go back to the college game. But it might be his way of saying to the NFL, like, look, I do want to come back and I'm serious about coming back. So look, I'm even showing interest in a different coaching opportunity at the college level. So I'm obviously not against this idea. To me, that kind of shows that I think he's just kind of showing that he wants to come back. I don't know that he would actually take a position in North Carolina. That would surprise me, guys. It really would. Even though that there has been some talk about that, like I said, it really would surprise me. But I think he wants to be back in the league, and I think it's a very good possibility that he could end up back in the league. I just don't know what it would be with the Bears. I would tend to doubt that. But it looks like we got Tim back a little bit here now. He must have switched over to his phone or something. Your picture's actually a lot better on that too. So I guess that's a positive, even though it makes you, probably both of us look uglier knowing what people actually see what we look like now, thanks to that high definition screen you got there. So I don't know if I appreciate that or not, but anyways, I've been kind of going on about how I feel about Bill Belichick. So give us some short thoughts on him before we move on, because I know we got questions in the chat and we got to maybe dig into San Francisco just a little bit here, and we're running out of time. So give me your thoughts on that, and maybe we can dig into some more potential coaching hires next week.
Well, first, I apologize, guys. For whatever reason, my computer internet's not connecting very well. I checked my internet, I reset my router and everything. My phone's doing fine, but for whatever reason, my speed on my computer is not good. So San Francisco, clearly, I'm sure you've already talked about this, Jeff, but they're ravaged by injury right now. They're going to be missing McCaffrey again. They're missing a lot of weapons, possibly Trent Williams. So to me, it's honestly a game that the Bears very well could, and in my opinion, should win. It's just going to be a matter of what we get out of it with Thomas Brown as the head coach. So hopefully his leadership will be enough to get this thing on track. I mean, we've played really well lately. It's just been a matter of getting the team to win in late game situations. It's been a huge issue. So hopefully Thomas Brown will bring in that a better clock management, better in-game management than Eberflus ever did, which could be the difference in winning and losing these games. So let's hope that that works itself out, and then we can get a win here. We really need one. So, yeah. But as far as this game goes, it should be interesting. I'm just not sure how it's going to play out with San Francisco as far as they go. I think anybody that thinks that Kyle Shanahan is on the hot seat is out of their mind. This guy is not at all, it's not, there's no concern of mine that he's going to be fired or anything like that. The only thing I could ever see possibly happening with that is they say, hey, we want to rebuild, and he's not going to be interested in any type of rebuild. So to me, there's zero chance of that. I don't know what your opinion is on that, Jeff, but for anybody that thinks that the Bears actually have an opportunity to have him as a head coach is crazy.
Yeah, I kind of talked about that earlier. I just don't see a scenario with that. And there is a question in here from Jay Grizz talking about Thomas Brown being his vote, but what about McVay maybe? And look, it's the same kind of thing. I just feel like none of these guys are going to be available. There's just no way their teams would let them go in any scenario. They've had way too much success in what they've done. And, more often than not, outside of like having injuries ravage their teams, they've had success. Okay. McVay wins games when his players are healthy. He got to a Super Bowl with Jared Goff, who before he, had his resurgence with Detroit, looked like he was going to be a failed first-round quarterback, from a failed number 1 overall pick. He's obviously bounced back since. I still don't think he's lived quite up to that potential. I don't know that he ever will, but that's another story for another day. But Mr. Charleston stuff that just extended Shanahan's contract, that I am not sure about. I'd have to do some research on that. But again, even if they did, there's just no scenario in my brain that I can wrap my head around that they would ever let him go for any reason. This guy who has had nothing but success with them as a head coach, outside of, again, his team being ravaged by injuries. I can only think of 2 seasons in like the last, like close to a decade now that they've had that hasn't been very good since Kyle Shanahan's been there. And it was both injury ravaged seasons. So as Aldo says here, yes, that both Shanahan and GM John Lynch were extended until 2025. So there's that. They are under contract for at least through next year. So I just don't see a scenario like that. McVay, I don't see a scenario like that. So, and as far as the upcoming game with San Francisco, they've got so many injuries. The big one being Trent Williams, and it doesn't look like Nick Bosa is going to play either. He's doubtful, but Williams is definitely out. That's big for the Bears. I mean, this is an opportunity for them to turn some things around here and get going, and to show something in this Thomas Brown era. Obviously San Francisco's not at their best strength right now, so they should be trying to take advantage of that. Go win a game that's very capable of being won. You've hung with 3 of the best teams in the league over the past 3 weeks. So why there's no reason to me that you can't hang tight here with San Francisco and go out and win a football game. You look like the team they're just energized in a different way with Thomas Brown than they have been in the last several weeks with Matt Eberflus. So I feel like we're looking at a situation now where there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to win a football game and do something. So I like their chances. I like their chances against San Francisco this week. I think we have like I said, an opportunity to build on what they did the last 3 weeks. Even though they lost those games, they look good in certain moments. I still don't understand why they're starting they start so slow offensively. The first half last week was atrocious, but then the second half comes around and Caleb was I mean, that guy, he showed exactly why he was the number 1 overall pick. Caleb made some you guys, I don't know why I didn't talk about this earlier, and I could go on for days about this, but I'll keep it short because we don't have a ton of time. But some of the throws that Caleb Williams made in that game last week, you guys, is just it's absurd. I mean, there are guys, there are not very many guys in the league who can do that, who can make those kinds of throws. There's a handful, if that. I'm trying to think of some of the examples of them. Both the touchdown throws to Keenan were good. I mean, good way to process too. I think Keenan was like the 3rd read on one of those touchdowns. He threw that ball to Kmet on that late. I think it was the end of the first half, if I'm not mistaken. He threw that ball to Kmet. They were backed up in their own territory, like their own 5, I think it was, and he threw that ball to Kmet. It was just like. The amount of velocity that he had on that throw was just like you're looking at it. It's hard to believe how hard he throws the balls sometimes when you see this. It really is something different. I mean, because it comes out of his hands so fast too. And the next thing you know, it's at the target point. So that can't be overstated. The way he's able to thread some of these balls in there. And one thing that I did like, another thing I liked a lot about last week's game with Caleb is that touchdown throw that he made to DJ Moore. DJ got open pretty quickly. He beat Brian Branch on that fade route from the slot. Caleb saw it, and he made a good throw. It was like I'm not sure if it was I think it was like a 20. It might have been in the red zone, but it was a deep enough throw to where he had to put some touch on it. And it's throws that he's been missing on early in the season. A lot of times he missed on several of those kinds of throws. And the fact that he made that throw, an easy touchdown pass, to keep him in the game there, that was real progress to me. It's showing me he's getting more comfortable, and I love to see that. So, other than that, I think that this is, like I said, I think this is a good opportunity. I could go on and on about Caleb, like I said, but I think he's going to keep building on this. I'm interested to see how the defense looks with Eric Washington calling plays here. I really am. I think they're going to blitz more, in my personal opinion. And I want to see how that looks because they haven't been getting enough pressure with the 4-man rush, in my opinion. So do you have any quick thoughts on that, Tim, before we get to some of these questions?
I think they're going to blitz more often. If you're talking about the Bears defense with
right, yeah.
Washington, I mean, I missed some of that, Jeff, just from changing over. But I do think that Eric Washington will blitz more often than Flus did. I think he'll be more aggressive, especially with having that defensive line background, being a defensive line coach in Buffalo and how good that defensive line was. But I agree that I think they're going to blitz more often, and that could help out this defensive line who has not gotten pressure very much thus far over the last, several games, several weeks. And honestly, this entire season, and a lot of people are saying Montez Sweat has been bad this year. If we're being totally honest, I think Montez Sweat is banged up a lot. I think he's playing through injury. I think he's actually seriously injured or hurt, and he's just playing through it. You can just see that he's lost a little bit of a step, and he's not the same player he was last year. I don't think that that's indicative of Montez Sweat taking a step back in his ability or his play just because he got his contract. I really think he's hurt. So, thank you, Plank, for giving us a super chat there. I wasn't aware that happened. Missed that one, but we appreciate that. But yeah, so I do believe that they're going to blitz more often, and hopefully that will help out how this goes. But yeah, I agree, Jeff. I think that's going to happen, and I do like Eric Washington calling the plays. I think as well as Flus did at times, I think he's too conservative. How he was calling plays or how he was coaching, period. And Greg has made this point on his show, Gabriel Talks Football, that he just plays or he coaches like he's afraid to lose. Like he's just coaching not to lose instead of coaching to win. So I really think that Eric Washington will be more aggressive, and hopefully that will help this defense out, especially this secondary. And I don't know where people are getting this, that Jalen Johnson is not playing well. Jalen Johnson's been a machine this year. He has one or two bad plays, and everybody thinks he's been awful. Teams don't even throw the ball his way because they're afraid of him. That's ridiculous. I don't know where people get this from. So I think that's nuts. Let's not even go that far. Let's not even talk about Jalen Johnson not being good this year. I think you people are out of your mind if you say that. He's been excellent this year. Still.
I don't think he's been quite as good as he was last year, just because he hasn't quite had the ball production, and just in general, I'm just not sure
he's been targeted even less this year than he was last year.
Well, he gave up a 63-yard catch last week.
Yes,
he tripped and fell, but still, you can't ignore that fact. So, he hasn't been quite, in my opinion, I don't think he's quite as good as he was last year. He's still been a great player. Don't get me wrong. So I agree with you on that, Tim. He's been very, very, very good for this defense. So you can't, he's been pretty much shut down for the most part.
But it's also hard when you're not getting a pass rush. As a defensive back, exactly. When there's no pass rush, what do you expect? Excuse me.
Yes. Yeah, and that's, again, that's part, in my opinion, that's part of the reason why the defense was as good as they were as well early in the season, as far as, keeping opponents limited to points, is they were doing a good job with their pass rush, and the secondary was, having an easier time making plays on the football. So they got to get some of that back. And that's why I said, and I agree with you, as you mentioned after that, that again, I think they're going to blitz more with Eric Washington. And I think it's going to lead to, again, since they haven't been getting the pressure with the front four, it'll lead to more opportunity in the back end as well. So that's just kind of my thoughts on that. We're running out of time. So and I want to get to some of these questions you guys have. So here's one from McFack. This is an interesting one here. He wants to know if Eric Bieniemy is who he's talking about, or Byron Leftwich, them being available, they both have Super Bowls, if we think that they would make sense. Personally, if you guys don't know, Eric Bieniemy, McFack just asked that question. I'm not sure if I said that before, but Bieniemy just lost his job as the offensive coordinator at a college, UCLA. There was an announcement that it was a mutual thing. There's been a back and forth between his agent and some other people that, what actually happened. He got fired. And the fact of the matter is he just has had a total fall from grace. I don't know that he would have ever been a fit for the Bears anyways, but there's just a reason he had never been hired. And now I don't think he's ever going to get hired after what's been happening the last several years with him. So that's my thoughts on him. Byron Leftwich.
Well, and Greg has also mentioned there's some skeletons in his past and that no NFL team wants to hire him as a head coach.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yes.
I'm not sure about the truth behind that. You'd have to give us some more detail on that. I'm not sure, but like I said, though, as far as Byron Leftwich is concerned, I like the way I think he was a good coordinator, especially with Tom Brady. I feel like they worked well together. I don't know that he can lead a team. I don't know if he would be a good head coach. I'm not sure why where is he at right now? I believe he's in college right now, isn't he? Coordinating somewhere. I could be wrong about that. He might be out of work right now. But if that's the case, that's kind of concerning too. So I just don't see that either one of those guys as potential candidates. I think, like I said, we kind of ran out of time this week, but we'll get into more next week who we think would be some good fits and who are some potential candidates, because we have a lot of time to talk about that in the next several weeks.
Let's mention this, though, really quick, Jeff, before we go, because I know Jay Grizz is on the show.
We got more questions to get to in here. Okay. There's a handful. Let's do that real quick. Let's see. So Slick, this is a decent question. Slick wants to know, Slick Sophistication, what if Belichick took the Ohio State job? That would all depend on Ryan Day getting fired, which I don't know is actually going to happen because he's done a pretty good job.
Depends on how they do in the playoff. If they win in the playoff, he's not getting fired.
Yeah, probably not. But I don't think Belichick would take that job anyways. Again, like I said earlier in the show, I think he's more or less just posturing to get another NFL job. I could be wrong about that, but I think he wants to work in the league still.
If he wants to work at all.
Vizo, speaking of Vizo, one of our oh, I'm sorry, Tim. You were talking about Jay Grizz. I was about to say, Vizo, you're a resident Notre Dame fan here with us, but I'm not sure that you actually are. But he wants to know if we think what we think about Albert Breer's comments. Excuse me, I can't talk, regarding what Ben Johnson is looking for in an organization and was targeted towards the Bears. I think it could have been targeted towards the Bears. I think it's targeted towards just about anybody that could interview him, though. I don't remember the exact comments offhand, but to kind of give you guys a general idea, Johnson basically said that he wants the past regimes to admit their mistakes and show how they're going to move on from him. Give him an idea of how they plan to move on. He wants to work jointly with them. I think there was I think that something about contracts being aligned with the GM was in there. So basically, just the report was he basically wants to be put in a good position. Oh, and another thing that he said was he's only going to take interviews of teams that he has serious interest in taking the actual head coaching job. So,
and he will not be searching for jobs. He was wait for the jobs to come to him.
Right. So, I mean, my thoughts on all that is like, he's probably trying to tell teams what he's looking for to get ahead of the curve. And the Bears very well could be targeted in that because of the fact that they let their coach go early. And there's a report out there that he was interested in the Bears job last year. So, I think it's possible that is the case. I think Ben Johnson will absolutely be interviewed. There's absolutely no way in hell he won't be interviewed. I think he's a very serious head coach candidate. There's a very serious chance for him to be hired. I think it's not a done deal by any stretch. Obviously, I just think he's a hot name for a reason. The question is whether his innovation is of an offensive mind and how well he leads an offense. Can that translate to him leading a team, a full team, offense, defense, special teams, and getting the job done the way it needs to be done from a head coaching perspective? Again, we'll have to wait and see. We'll talk about that more in the future here. Last comment, Cliff actually was asking Tim this specifically, probably because of some tirade Tim was making, but he wants to know if it's going to be interesting. He said it's going to be interesting to see what Brown and Washington can do, plus the guy who is the new offensive coordinator, and that is Chris Beatty. And Tim, I'll let you respond to this after I put my take here because it was your question, but I'm interested too, Cliff. I think Brown has already kind of given us a taste of what to look forward to as an offensive play caller. I think the tandem that he's working with Chris Beatty, the new offensive coordinator, as far as the clock management thing, as I talked about earlier in the show, I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic to pay attention to. Also, how they work together to run the offense in this game. If there are things that are done differently this week than Brown has shown to be doing the past couple weeks, I will see that as a potential Chris Beatty wrinkle, and I will like that. And potentially as a guy who could be hired on as a full-time coordinator if Thomas Brown keeps the job. So, in Washington as well, like we talked about it for a few minutes ago, I think he's going to blitz more. I think the defense, we'll potentially see some different coverage looks as well than just the soft coverage that the Eberflus likes to play. I think we're going to see some more press because our DBs they excel in that area. So I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on. We could see maybe more man coverage with Washington. I'll be interested to see that as well. So yes, I agree with you, Cliff. That's going to be an interesting dynamic to keep an eye on. So what are your final thoughts on that, Tim, before we get out of here tonight?
I don't think it's going to be any worse than what it's been as far as that goes. I think it can only go up is the way I look at it, especially when it comes to late game situations. I don't see that getting worse because that was about as bad as it gets. I mean, you have a coach who literally has no clue what's going on and he has no ability to process things quickly. So to me, that part of it can only get better. I think the offense, I don't see it taking a step back. I think it's going to be just fine where it's been, and it's going to continue maybe hopefully to even get better, especially with Caleb Williams getting better. And we've obviously seen an uptick in those receivers over the last several weeks. They've done a great job, and they've improved as far as their connection is with Caleb Williams. So that part should be better. I'd like to see, and I think we might see Jalen Johnson shadowing the top receiver on these teams more often now. We're starting to see him do that a little bit more. That will be interesting because that's what he should be doing. Why would you not have your top corner covering the best receiver on these teams? You can't trust Tyreek Stevenson or Terrell Smith to cover guys like Justin Jefferson. It's not going to work. That was dumb. So I think that's great that they're doing that. I think Jalen Johnson has plenty of ability to do that where he can move around the field. I think he'll be just fine. So we'll see as far as that goes. I'd be interested because I think Jalen Johnson going up against Deebo Samuel would be the best bet. I don't like some of these other guys. Actually, I do like Kyler Gordon being on him. I think that'd be a good matchup because Kyler Gordon is aggressive and he's also physical. And so is Deebo Samuel. So that could be really interesting seeing how that goes. But as far as lining up on the outside, I think you shadow him with Jalen Johnson, in my personal opinion. And I think that would be good for the defense. But I don't know. Do we have any? If we don't have any more questions, Jeff, I do want to point one thing out quickly. I want to mention Jay Grizz earlier because I know he's our resident Notre Dame fan and he was on the show earlier. and I was waiting for a question of this. There's a lot of speculation and rumor that Kevin Warren wants to interview Marcus Freeman for the head coaching job. And I just want to start and preface it by saying I love Marcus Freeman. I think he's done a great job at Notre Dame, especially over the last several years. And, Jeff and I talked after the Northern Illinois game, and I was like ripping my hair. Like, it's same old at Notre Dame. Here we go. Another coach that can't seem to figure anything out against the bad teams, and we lose bad games, and we can't beat the good teams. But he's shut us up quick because they've really gone on a roll, and they've won all the he's had a really great record against ranked teams, and especially on the road against ranked teams. So hopefully that will continue to get better. He's done a great job with that. But personally, I think Marcus Freeman's over his head running as a head coach for the Chicago Bears. I don't think he's ready for that yet. And college and the pros are a totally different thing. That's a whole new level, and he's been an excellent recruiter at Notre Dame. I don't know what kind of connections he would have at Notre Dame. I can tell you this much: he was not very good at finding offensive coaches at Notre Dame until he was able to bring Mike Denbrock back. And I don't even know if I'm a big fan of Mike Denbrock either. I think he's done a good job with what they have, but they haven't ran a pro-style offense at Notre Dame. They're still running that spread. So.
Well, I don't want to dig into that too much because that's another story for another day with Notre Dame. But I mean, I have my thoughts on that too, that maybe I'll talk about one day with you guys. But at the end of the day, as far as Freeman is concerned, the one thing I'll say about him is that, yes, he's done a good job at Notre Dame. It is concerning that he's lost some of these games against teams they had no business losing to, like Northern Illinois this year. There's been a couple games in the past couple years too against other teams, and I can't think of the names of them off the top of my head for whatever reason now, but teams they had no business losing to, unranked teams in low conferences who don't have a history of winning football games. So that's a concern. But the one thing I will say about Freeman is I don't think he's ready right now, but I think he's well on his way to being one of those kind of up and coming coaches that very well could make his way into the pros.
Well, and another side note really quick with that, Marcus Freeman's kids are growing up right now in the Penn schools, which is right in Mishawaka. And his son is actually like a state ranked wrestler. He plays as a freshman. He's a junior this year. I don't see him up and leaving necessarily at this point while his kids are in school and finishing up school, especially his oldest. They have a lot of young kids as well. So maybe after this kid's out of high school, but I don't think he's necessarily jumping to the NFL right away because of that. I don't know that. I don't know him personally, but it's a possibility. So regardless, like I said, I just don't think he's ready for a pro coaching job yet. I think he's got a few more years to go still, and he still needs to improve as a coach, in my opinion, even though he is a great leader. But
yeah, like I said, I just don't think he's ready yet, but I think he's kind of well on his way. And Aldo makes a great point. He'd be crazy to leave Notre Dame right now anyways. I mean, that's a phenomenal place to be and a great job, and he's having success. So here's a graphic on the screen here, guys. Aldo ran a poll recently for fans about who should be of these candidates, who we would most like to see coach the Bears. And he's got John Gruden on here, Mike Vrabel, Ben Johnson, and Thomas Brown. Surprisingly, Ben Johnson only got 3% of the votes. Even John Gruden got 10%, but Thomas Brown got 86% of the votes. Landslide. That's crazy. So you guys must have been voting here in on the bar room with us, or maybe it was on Twitter. But I'm sorry, on the video here with us. But it might have been on Twitter. I'm not sure. But in any case, Aldo says it was here. But look, guys, I'm kind of with you right now. I think it's kind of early to say right now, but I think that the early returns on Brown are very, very positive. I like my first impressions of him. I like the way he's run the offense for the past couple weeks. So I am pretty optimistic about him as the head coach, but I don't want to jump to conclusions. Yeah, I still think they need to run a thorough process, but at this point, I would not be surprised at all if Thomas Brown ended up being the guy who was hired next year.
Well, that would be the best case scenario for the reasons I mentioned earlier, not to mention he has won a Super Bowl and he's been part of a winning culture with Sean McVay in LA. So just one of those things I was talking about earlier as well is they need a coach that has a winning culture. They can bring that in. And to me, like Thomas Brown is at the top of that list because he was the assistant head coach when they won the Super Bowl. And it's been known factually that Sean McVay leaned heavily on Thomas Brown at that time. So that would be, again, best case scenario if he is able to right the ship here and get us some wins. I personally am surprised at the Mike Vrabel thing. There's a lot of people on Mike Vrabel's bandwagon. I can't believe that 0% of you guys voted Mike Vrabel, but I agree. I think Mike Vrabel would be a big mistake. There was too much. The ending there was not very good. And I'm not so sure he can bring in good coordinators. We'll see. Even though he's had good ones in the past, I don't know if he's got the connections to do it now. And let's face reality, Cleveland has been a giant mess this year. Not saying that's all on the defense, because the defense hasn't been bad, but that team's a mess. So,
well, there's one last comment on here from General Manager John. He must be a couch GM here with us like we are, but he says that Thomas Brown is not a top head coach candidate in any universe. If they are lazy and stay with him next season, it is a slap in the face to fan base. He is not a top 10 head coach candidate next season with these big names. I'll say this, John. Like I said before, I still think they have to have a thorough, exhaustive process, regardless of how Thomas Brown performs late in the season here. But if he performs well, if he rights the ship, and he is, the guy that they end up choosing through that exhaustive process because they feel like he's the right guy to lead the team forward, I mean, you can't hate on it. You really can't. I mean, you might I guess you can if you want to, but I just feel like he would have shown at that point if he's done if he's checked all the boxes. They've been winning games. They've shown a difference in the way they're playing ball, and if they're interviewing him amongst all these other people and they still choose him, that should say something. But that's just my opinion on that. So we'll have to wait and see. We got a lot of time to talk about that in the next several weeks. So anyways, guys, we had a great show tonight. You guys were really, really active in the chat. We appreciate that as always. You had some great questions for us. I'm sure there'll be a ton more to come in the next several weeks, as I said before, with all the coaching potential that we have here for next season with all the candidates that you could be potentially looking at, I should say. So before we get out of here, just a quick reminder, guys, as always, to please like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can follow us all on X or Twitter. Aldo, our executive producer, is at Barroom Network. You can follow me at _Jeff Willis. You can follow Tim here, my co-host, at Tim Willis24. And again, we are here every Friday night for you guys at 7 Central, 8 Eastern. Or if you're in Pacific time like I am, we're at 5 o'clock my time. So thanks again, guys, as always. And until next week, let's bear down and get that win this week.
Go Bears!
The Willis Twin Towers podcast is a Barroom Network production. Jeff and Tim Willis are the co-hosts and co-producers. Aldo Gandia is executive producer. Music is licensed from Pond 5. Any copyrighted material used was done under the Fair Use Doctrine for commentary, criticism, and informative purposes. All of our programming is available in audio-only format by subscribing to the Barroom Network wherever you download podcasts. Videos are archived on YouTube.